The first sign wasn't the fire. It was the silence. Daniel Cross noticed it before anyone else in the bunker dared to say it out loud. His fingers hovered over the console, waiting for another stream of satellite data, but nothing came. No bird migrations flagged on radar. No civilian air traffic. No military chatter bleeding through encrypted bands. Just nothing. It was wrong. "Do you hear that?" Daniel asked quietly. Marcus Hale didn't even look up from his station. "Hear what?" "Exactly." That made Marcus pause. The low hum of machines filled the underground command center, but beyond that, no static, no distant signals, no noise from the world above. It was as if Earth itself had been muted. Then the alarms hit. Every screen in the bunker flashed red at once. A sharp, piercing tone cut through the silence, sending a jolt through Daniel's chest. Unidentified objects entering atmosphere, someone shouted across the room. Daniel's screen flickered back to life. Satellite feeds scrambled, then stabilized just enough to show the sky over the Pacific. At first, he thought it was a glitch. Massive distortions in the cloud layer, like something enormous was moving just beneath them. Then one shape broke through. A wing. Not metal. Not synthetic. Alive. Daniel leaned closer, his breath catching. "That's not possible." The thing rose higher, dragging the clouds apart like curtains. Its body followed, colossal, scaled, ancient. Sunlight bent around it, casting a shadow that swallowed miles of ocean. And then another emerged. And another. Dozens. The room fell into stunned silence as the realization spread. "Those are," Marcus started, then stopped. "Say it," Daniel whispered. Marcus swallowed hard. "Dragons." The word felt absurd. Impossible. Until the first one opened its jaws. A glow built deep in its throat, bright, violent. The feed overloaded for a split second, then corrected just in time to show a city coastline. Tokyo. Daniel's pulse spiked. No, no. The dragon exhaled. Fire didn't just fall, it consumed. A tidal wave of flame rolled across the skyline, swallowing skyscrapers like they were made of paper. Glass melted. Steel twisted. Entire districts vanished beneath a storm of heat. The feed cut out. Someone cursed. Someone else screamed. "Switch feeds." Marcus barked. Berlin came up next. Same shadows. Same wings. This time, the military responded faster. Missiles streaked upward, contrails slicing the sky. They hit, direct impacts. For a moment, hope flickered. Then the smoke cleared. The dragon was still there. Unharmed. Its scales shimmered, glowing faintly where the explosions had struck. And then, almost lazily, it turned toward the city. Berlin lasted 9 minutes. New York came after. Daniel watched in numb horror as jets scrambled between skyscrapers, firing everything they had. One dragon fell behind them, weaving effortlessly through the barrage. It didn't chase the jets. It ignored them. Instead, it dove straight into Manhattan. Flames erupted in every direction. Streets became rivers of fire. The skyline, one of the most iconic in the world, collapsed in less than 5 minutes. Daniel couldn't look away. His hands shook over the console, helpless. "We can't stop them," someone whispered. Marcus slammed his fist against the desk. "We don't even understand them." "They are coordinated," Daniel said, forcing his voice steady. "Look at the patterns, they're hitting major population centers first. Strategic targets." Marcus stared at him. "You're saying this is planned?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Because deep down, he already knew. The screens flickered again, then all went black. For a single, endless second, the bunker was plunged into darkness. Then one display came back online. Not a live feed. A message. Strange symbols filled the screen, jagged, ancient, shifting as if they weren't meant to be read by human eyes. The system struggled, running translation algorithms at impossible speeds. Daniel leaned in, heart pounding. "Come on, come on." The symbols rearranged. Words formed. And when they did, the entire room froze. "This world is reclaimed." No signature. No origin. Just a statement. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Reclaimed, that means." "They think it was theirs first," Daniel finished. Silence fell again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Crushing. Above them, the world was burning. Daniel stared at the message, something cold and sharp settling in his chest. Fear was still there, but beneath it, something else began to grow. Something harder. His hands stopped shaking. They made a mistake, he said quietly. Marcus glanced at him. What? Daniel's eyes didn't leave the screen. They think we're already gone. Another distant rumble echoed through the bunker as something massive struck the surface far above. Daniel clenched his jaw. Then we show them, he said, voice low and steady. We're not. Humanity didn't collapse. It compressed. Within 48 hours, the world's government stopped pretending borders mattered. Emergency broadcasts merged into a single global directive. Military command structures fused under one unified network. Old enemies shared data. Old secrets were unlocked without hesitation. Survival had no room for pride. Deep beneath what used to be Colorado, Daniel Cross stepped into Facility Blackforge for the first time. It didn't look like hope. It looked like desperation carved into steel. The corridors were crowded with scientists, engineers, soldiers, anyone who could still think while the world above burned. Screens lined every wall, displaying fragments of a war humanity didn't understand yet. Marcus Hale walked beside Daniel, tablet in hand, eyes sunken but focused. Welcome to the last bad idea we've got, Marcus muttered. Daniel glanced around. This is it? This is what's supposed to stop them? Marcus gave a dry laugh. No. This is what's supposed to explain them. That was the real shift. Not bigger bombs. Not stronger defenses. Understanding. They had recovered their first dragon corpse 12 hours earlier, if recovered was the right word. It had fallen after colliding with a mountain range during an attack. Not shot down. Not defeated. Just, unlucky. Still, it was enough. Inside the containment chamber, the air felt heavier. The dragon's body lay stretched across reinforced platforms, easily the size of a commercial aircraft. Even in death, it radiated something unnatural: heat, pressure, presence. Its scales shimmered under the harsh lights, each one reflecting faint patterns like liquid metal. Daniel stopped at the observation window. God, he whispered. Marcus tapped the glass. That thing shrugged off 12 surface-to-air missiles before it crashed. Then how do we kill something like that? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the team working below. By figuring out what it's made of. The first discoveries broke every rule Daniel thought he understood. Scales aren't just armor, one researcher explained, projecting a model onto the main screen. They absorb kinetic energy and redistribute it across the surface. Another voice cut in. Heat resistance is off the charts. It's not just insulation, it's conversion. Thermal energy gets redirected through the bloodstream. Daniel frowned. So fire makes them stronger? Not stronger, Marcus said, stepping forward. But definitely not weaker. The room went quiet. Bones? Daniel asked. A third scientist responded. Composite structure. Denser than titanium, but flexible. Almost reactive. They adjust under stress. Daniel exhaled slowly. So bullets don't work. Missiles don't work. Heat doesn't work. Marcus looked at him. Not the way we've been using them. That was when the conversation changed. They stopped asking how to destroy dragons. And started asking how dragons worked. Days blurred together. Sleep became optional. Time lost meaning. Daniel found himself buried in data, flight patterns, attack timing, energy readings. And the more he looked, the worse it became. They are not random, he said one night, pulling up a global map. Marcus leaned over his shoulder. Show me. Daniel highlighted strike zones. Power grids first. Then communication hubs. Then military installations. Population centers after that. Marcus's expression hardened. Systematic dismantling. They're crippling us before wiping us out. Marcus nodded slowly. That's not instinct. No, Daniel agreed. That's strategy. A silence followed. Then Marcus said the thing neither of them wanted to admit. They're being directed. The breakthrough came from somewhere unexpected. Blood. A junior researcher had been running electromagnetic scans when something strange happened. The dragon's blood, thick, dark, almost metallic, reacted to specific frequencies. Violently. It's like it's alive in a different way, she explained, her voice shaking with excitement. Not just biological. There's conductivity. Responsiveness. Marcus's eyes lit up. Show me the data. She did. And within minutes, the room shifted again, from analysis to possibility. Daniel stared at the readings. If their bodies interact with energy like that. Marcus finished the thought. Then we stop hitting them with force. And start hitting them with something they can't absorb. Marcus turned to the engineering team. Build me a weapon that uses this. 72 hours later, they had a prototype. It didn't look like much, just a massive rail-based cannon mounted on a reinforced platform. But everything about it was different. Instead of explosive payloads, it fired hyper-accelerated conductive rounds designed to disrupt the dragon's internal energy flow. Daniel stood on the observation deck as the weapon powered up. "You really think this will work?" he asked. Marcus didn't look away from the target feed. "I think it's the first thing we've made that actually might." The test target wasn't theoretical. It was real. A dragon circling above the ruins of Moscow. The cannon charged with a rising hum, energy building to a pitch that made Daniel's teeth ache. "Target locked," a technician called out. Marcus gave a single nod. "Fire." The shot cracked through the sky faster than sound. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the dragon jerked mid-flight. Its wings faltered. A pulse of light rippled across its body, unnatural, unstable. And then, it fell. Not gliding. Not diving. Falling. The impact shook the ground even from miles away. Silence filled the control room. No one moved. No one spoke. Daniel stared at the screen, barely breathing. "Did we just," he started. Marcus finished it quietly. "We killed it." The room erupted. Not cheers. Not celebration. Something sharper. Hope. Daniel leaned against the railing, staring at the fallen shape in the distance. For the first time since the sky burned, humanity had struck back. And for the first time, the dragons had something to fear. The first victory didn't change the war. It changed the enemy. At first, people celebrated. The footage of the fallen dragon over Moscow spread through every remaining network like wildfire. For a few brief hours, the world remembered what hope felt like. Then the dragons adapted. Daniel Cross saw it in the data before he saw it in the sky. "They've altered their flight paths," he said, pulling up tracking logs inside Blackforge. "Less exposure time. Higher altitude. They're avoiding predictable angles." Marcus Hale leaned closer, frowning. "That's not instinctive behavior." "No," Daniel said quietly. "It's reactive." The next wave of attacks confirmed it. Dragons no longer descended blindly into cities. They didn't linger. They didn't rage. They executed. Power grids were the first targets. Entire regions went dark in minutes. Then came water treatment facilities, communication arrays, underground transport tunnels, anything that kept human systems running. "They're dismantling us piece by piece," Marcus muttered. Daniel nodded. "And they're doing it faster than we can adapt." Worse still, they began targeting Blackforge-adjacent installations, supply routes, satellite uplinks, even secondary research bunkers. It felt personal. It felt precise. "They know what we're doing," Daniel said. Marcus didn't respond right away. Because there was only one explanation. They've always known. The realization settled like ice in Daniel's chest. This wasn't a war between species. It was something far more calculated. Inside the analysis chamber, the team gathered around a rotating projection of Earth. Red zones pulsed across continents, strike sites, losses, failures. "Look at the timing," Daniel said, highlighting sequences. "They hit infrastructure just before we reroute resources. They strike communication hubs right before coordinated counterattacks." A systems analyst spoke up. "You're suggesting predictive modeling?" "I'm suggesting," Daniel said, voice tightening, "that we're being watched." Silence followed. Then Marcus stepped forward. "Not watched," he said. "Managed." The answer came from the sky. Or rather, beyond it. One of the last functioning deep space monitoring arrays picked up something unusual. It wasn't a distress signal. It wasn't debris. It was a transmission. Directed. Structured. Intentional. And it wasn't coming from Earth. Daniel stood in the communications lab as the raw signal played through speakers, a low, rhythmic pulse layered with complex modulation. It didn't sound like language. It sounded like control. "Can we translate it?" Daniel asked. A technician shook his head. "Not directly. It's not built on any known linguistic structure." Marcus crossed his arms. "Then break it apart. Patterns, repetition, frequency shifts, anything." Hours turned into a blur of analysis. Algorithms tore through the signal, isolating fragments, comparing structures. Slowly, Painfully, something began to emerge. Not words. Instructions. It's not communication in the way we understand it, one researcher explained. It's more like command layering. Hierarchical signals. Daniel's stomach dropped. Like programming. Marcus's eyes darkened. Or control. Finally, after nearly 12 hours, the system produced something resembling a translation. Rough. Incomplete. But clear enough. The room held its breath as the text appeared on screen. Phase 1 complete. Resistance within acceptable limits. No one spoke. No one moved. Daniel felt his pulse hammering in his ears. Phase 1, he repeated. Marcus finished the thought, his voice low and grim. This isn't the invasion. Daniel turned slowly toward him. It's the evaluation. Everything changed in that moment. The dragons weren't conquerors. They were tools. Weapons sent ahead of something else, something that wasn't even here yet. Daniel stared at the projection of Earth, now covered in scars. They're testing us, he said. Measuring response times. Tracking adaptation. Learning how we fight. And how we fail, Marcus added. A cold silence filled the room. Acceptable limits, Daniel muttered. That means there are unacceptable ones. Marcus nodded. Which means if we perform too well, they escalate. And if we perform too poorly? Marcus asked. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The implications spread through Blackforge like a shockwave. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about proving humanity was something more than expendable. Because whatever was out there was watching. Hours later, Daniel stood alone in the observation corridor, staring at the reinforced glass separating him from the dragon remains below. Even in death, the creature looked powerful. Engineered. Designed. For war, Daniel whispered. Behind him, Marcus approached quietly. You thinking what I'm thinking? Marcus asked. Daniel didn't turn. They built these things to test civilizations. Marcus exhaled slowly. And we just passed phase 1. Daniel finally looked at him. Barely. Another distant rumble echoed through the facility as something struck miles away on the surface. Neither of them flinched. Then we don't wait for phase 2, Marcus said. Daniel's gaze hardened. No, he agreed. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, tired, strained, but no longer uncertain. Because now, for the first time since the war began, they understood the truth. This wasn't a fight for territory. It wasn't even a fight for survival. It was a test. And humanity had just realized something the enemy hadn't accounted for. Tests can be failed. But they can also be broken. Daniel clenched his fists. Then we stop playing by their rules, he said quietly. Marcus gave a grim nod. Good, he replied. Because I don't think they're ready for what happens next. Once humanity understood it was being tested, it stopped reacting. And started rewriting the rules. Blackforge was no longer just a research facility. It became something sharper, more dangerous. The goal wasn't to match the dragons anymore. It was to surpass whatever had created them. Daniel Cross stood at the center of it. You're asking us to weaponize the human body, one of the senior scientists said, disbelief cutting through his voice. This isn't augmentation. This is transformation. Marcus Hale didn't flinch. Call it whatever helps you sleep. We need something that can survive direct engagement. Machines can do that. Machines are predictable, Marcus snapped. They adapt faster than our systems. We need something that can think and evolve in real time. The scientist hesitated. And you think that's human? Marcus glanced toward Daniel. No, he said quietly. I think it's what comes next. Project Titanfall began that same day. It wasn't announced. It wasn't debated. It simply started. Dragon tissue became the foundation, scale fragments, blood samples, neural strands. Everything they had learned was pushed beyond ethical limits and into something entirely new. Daniel volunteered before they could even ask. You understand what this means? Marcus said, pulling him aside. Daniel nodded. I won't be the same. You might not even survive. Daniel met his gaze, steady. If we don't do this, nobody survives. Marcus held his stare for a long moment. Then he gave a single, reluctant nod. The procedure wasn't clean. It wasn't controlled. It was brutal. Daniel remembered flashes, cold metal, blinding lights, voices layered over each other. His body felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. Something burned through his veins, not heat, but energy. Alive. Violent. At one point, he heard himself screaming. At another, he wasn't sure if he still had a voice. Stabilize the reaction. His vitals are crashing. Push the regulator, now. Pain lost meaning somewhere in the chaos. Time stretched. Collapsed. Then. Nothing. When Daniel opened his eyes, the world felt different. Sharper. The light above him seemed too bright, too defined. He could hear distant footsteps through layers of reinforced walls. Even the air felt heavier, charged with something he couldn't quite name. He sat up slowly. His body responded instantly. Too instantly. Easy, Marcus's voice came from nearby. Daniel turned his head. Marcus stood a few feet away, watching him carefully. Not like a friend. Like a variable. How long? Daniel asked, his voice rough. 3 days, Marcus replied. We almost lost you twice. Daniel glanced down at his hands. They looked normal. But they didn't feel normal. A faint shimmer ran across his skin when the light hit it at the right angle, subtle, but there. What did you do to me? He asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer. Your body now processes energy differently, he said. Your cellular structure incorporates dragon-derived elements. Enhanced durability. Accelerated response. Reactive adaptation. Daniel flexed his fingers slowly. I can feel it, he said. Marcus nodded. You're not entirely human anymore. Daniel looked up at him. Good, he said quietly. Neither are they. The first test wasn't in a lab. It was in the field. A dragon had been sighted near the ruins of Istanbul, circling, observing, waiting. Not attacking. Studying. Perfect, Marcus said. Let's see what it does when the test fights back. Daniel stood at the edge of the deployment platform, staring out at the transport craft waiting for him. You sure about this? One of the soldiers asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. No, he said. Then he stepped forward anyway. The sky felt different at altitude. Thinner. Colder. Alive. Daniel stood inside the open bay of the aircraft, wind tearing past him as the city ruins came into view below. Smoke curled up from what was left of civilization. And above it, the dragon. It moved slowly, deliberately, its massive wings cutting through the air with terrifying precision. It hadn't noticed them yet. Target in sight, the pilot called out. Marcus's voice came through Daniel's comm. Remember, don't fight it like we did before. You're not human infantry anymore. Daniel's eyes locked onto the creature. I know, he said. Then what are you? Daniel stepped to the edge. The wind roared. His heart didn't race. It steadied. Something new. And then. He jumped. The fall should have killed him. It didn't. Air rushed past as the ground surged upward, but Daniel adjusted mid-drop, his body reacting faster than thought. When he hit, the impact cracked the pavement. And he was still standing. The dragon turned instantly. It saw him. Really saw him. For a split second, something changed in its posture. Recognition. Daniel felt it too. A connection. Not emotional. Structural. Like two things built from the same blueprint. Yeah, Daniel muttered. I see it too. The dragon roared, a blast of heat building in its throat. But this time, Daniel didn't run. He moved forward. Fast. Faster than anything human should be. The first strike landed before the dragon could react. And for the first time since the war began, a human didn't just survive against a dragon. He fought back. Miles away, in the control room, no one spoke as the live feed streamed in. Marcus watched in silence, his expression unreadable. Because what he was seeing wasn't just a soldier. It wasn't even just a weapon. It was something else entirely. Something the enemy hadn't planned for. As Daniel clashed with the dragon in a blur of motion and fire, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity hadn't just answered the test. It had changed the question. And whatever was watching from beyond was about to get a very different result. By the time humanity reached space, the war was already decided. The dragons just didn't know it yet. Project Titanfall changed everything. Daniel Cross wasn't the only one anymore. Dozens of enhanced soldiers now moved across the battlefield. Faster, stronger, impossible to predict. Wherever dragons appeared, they met something that could match them. And beat them. But victories on Earth weren't enough. Because the signal still continued. That cold, distant command stream, steady, unshaken, kept flowing from beyond the sky. It didn't react to losses. It didn't adapt like the dragons did. It simply observed. They don't care how many units they lose, Marcus Hale said, standing in the command center. To them, this is still phase 1. Daniel crossed his arms, eyes fixed on the projection of orbital space. Then we stop fighting the pieces, he said. We hit whoever's holding them. The idea should have been impossible. It wasn't. Using everything they had learned from dragon physiology, the energy-conductive blood, the adaptive structures, the strange interaction with electromagnetic fields, Blackforge built something no one had ever attempted before. A ship. Not powered by conventional engines. Not protected by conventional materials. It was grown as much as it was built. Hybrid architecture, one engineer explained. Part machine, part something else. Marcus kept it simpler. It works, he said. That's enough. Daniel stood inside the launch chamber, staring at the vessel through reinforced glass. It didn't look human. Its surface shifted subtly, like living metal. Light moved across it in faint pulses, almost like a heartbeat. You trust this thing? Marcus asked, stepping beside him. Daniel didn't look away. I trust what we've become, he said. Marcus studied him for a moment. You're not coming back the same, he said. Daniel let out a quiet breath. I didn't the first time. The launch shook what remained of the world. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, every remaining satellite, every surviving system tracked it. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. It was going on the offensive. Space was silent. Cold. Endless. But not empty. Daniel stood at the forward deck as the ship aligned with the signal's origin. Data streamed across the interface, translating patterns, mapping structures. Then, it appeared. At first, it looked like a distortion. A bend in space itself. Then the shape resolved. Massive. Unnatural. Not a ship. Not a station. A structure so vast it dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Layers of interlocking frameworks rotated slowly around a glowing core. Energy pulsed through it in controlled waves. Around it, dragons moved in formation, hundreds of them, orbiting like guardians. Marcus's voice came through the comm, quieter than Daniel had ever heard it. That's not an invasion fleet. Daniel finished the thought. It's a factory. The truth settled in with terrifying clarity. Worlds weren't conquered. They were processed. Evaluated. Broken down. Repurposed. And Earth had been next. They send the dragons first, Daniel said. See what happens. Measure resistance. And if the result isn't acceptable, Marcus added. Daniel's jaw tightened. They escalate. The dragons turned as the ship approached. They felt it. Recognized it. Something built from their own design. But different. Wrong. Here they come, Marcus warned. Daniel stepped forward, his body already responding, energy pulsing just beneath his skin. Good, he said. Let them watch. The battle didn't stretch into hours. It didn't need to. Humanity had spent the entire war learning one thing. How dragons worked. And now, they used it. The ship unleashed controlled bursts of energy tuned to disrupt the same internal systems that kept dragons alive. Waves of interference rippled through space, hitting the creatures before they could close distance. One by one, they fell. No firestorms. No drawn-out clashes. Just sudden, silent failure. The path cleared. Target the core, Marcus said. Daniel nodded, already moving. He didn't wait for systems to lock. Didn't wait for permission. He launched himself forward. The void rushed around him as he crossed the final distance alone. The structure loomed ahead, its surface shifting as if aware of him. Energy flared along its edges, defensive systems activating too late. Daniel hit the outer layer like a meteor. And broke through. Inside. It was worse. Not machinery. Not entirely. Organic conduits twisted through metallic frameworks. Energy flowed like blood. Pulses echoed through the structure like a heartbeat. A living system. A processing engine. Daniel felt it immediately. The same connection he'd felt with the dragons. But deeper. Older. This was the source. This ends now, he said quietly. He reached the core. A sphere of condensed energy, contained but unstable. Controlling everything. Watching everything. Testing everything. Daniel placed his hand against it. For a moment. Nothing happened. Then the reaction began. The energy surged, recognizing something familiar within him. And something incompatible. Marcus, Daniel said overcome. I think I found the flaw. Marcus's voice came through, tense. What kind of flaw? Daniel closed his eyes. The human kind. The explosion didn't sound like anything. In space, it couldn't. But it burned. A chain reaction tore through the structure, light erupting outward as systems collapsed in on themselves. The core destabilized, then failed completely. The entire construct folded inward and vanished in a silent burst of energy. On Earth, the effect was immediate. Every dragon in the sky stopped. No warning. No final attack. They simply fell. Lifeless. Across every continent, the war ended in the same moment. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't fear. Days later, Daniel stood on a hill overlooking what remained of a city. The sky was clear for the first time since the war began. Marcus approached from behind. It's over, he said. Daniel didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. We didn't just win, Marcus continued. We destroyed whatever started it. Daniel nodded slightly. Good, he said. Marcus hesitated. Then asked the question no one else could. What are we now? Daniel looked down at his hands, the faint shimmer still there, the power still present. Changed. Forged. Dangerous. Then he looked back at the sky. The reason, he said quietly. No one tries this again.